everyone, and welcome to the Birth Boot Camp podcast. I'm Hollie Hopley, your CEO.
I'm Cheryl Ameling, a certification coordinator.
And today we're kind of excited for what we're going to talk about today because it's something Cheryl and I are both passionate about. And I think we've talked about it a lot, but it's been a while. We haven't talked about it lately. Yeah. We talked a lot about it in 2020, like early 2021. But I have been reading a book the past couple of weeks. Let me get the title of it in front of me because I always forget it. It is called Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, and it is written by Rachel Reed. And I have absolutely loved it. And I have shared a bunch of quotes with it with Cheryl, and we just are, both really enjoying what she has to say. But there was something she said the other day that I read that I really loved. And it kind of goes back to me and why I do this work and why I think my work as a birth professional is important and why I want to continue to grow this community so that more families have support. So I'm just going to read it from this book. And she says, childbirth is a rite of passage that initiates a woman into motherhood and transforms her sense of self and her role in society. A woman's experience of birth is fundamental to her postnatal mental health and her capacity to mother. A positive birth experience contributes to a sense of accomplishment and well-being that increases confidence. In contrast, a negative experience can have a detrimental effect on psychological, social, and physical well-being in the postnatal period and beyond. Women remember the emotions they felt during their birth experience for decades afterwards. And to me, that just says it's so much more than just about the birth.
Oh, yeah.
We talk about that a lot. We talk about and we have childbirth classes. We definitely focus so much on that day and on the day that you welcome your baby into the world. But it's about so much more than that. Right. It is about how they are made to feel, because then that goes on and affects their early postpartum and their confidence as a woman and as a mother. I know for me personally that the day that I gave birth to my first child and I was like, wow, I can do anything. If I can do that, I can do anything. And it really increased my confidence in myself and my role as a mother. And changed even little things about my personality. I used to be super shy and quiet, and I'm still not the most outgoing person, but I'm I have something to say. I'm going to say it. And I think Cheryl, you had, similar experiences.
Yeah, I did. I love that quote. When you sent that to me, I don't know, when you love something and you can feel it in your bones, that's how I felt about this. And this is how I feel about this, this topic in general, because I don't know that I really knew how much it affected me as a woman until I started learning more about birth and hearing more experiences, because I think I'm kind of a rare, the oddity, I guess. I was around good birth experiences when I had a baby. I think that's kind of usually what we hear, all the bad birth experiences. And I heard those, but generally the people around me talked about birth very positively. And so I just kind of thought that's how birth was.
Right.
And then I did have that kind of birth. But I think as I had more children and I learned more about birth and more about other women's experiences that were different than mine, I realized oh, this really it is so much more than just the day of the birth. It's so much more than we give it credit for, than we give it it's I don't know what the word is, due diligence. I don't know. I don't know if that's the right thing, but it's this really big, powerful thing that we did that really does affect how you mother and how you feel about yourself and how you feel about your baby and how you feel about, this whole picture. And I think that when we just say, well, healthy mom, healthy baby, at the end of the day, really kind of discredits how big of a thing this is for a woman.
Yeah. And I think in today's society, there really just is no emphasis on that. Like it really is. It's like they're just trying to survive this experience. You know, they just want mom to be alive and baby to be alive. And there's like, that's all they care about. they don't think about how this is going to affect her in the long term, mentally, physically, emotionally. And I think that if we really took that whole picture into consideration, like I think more people would become passionate about this, and providers would hopefully, you know, treat them differently and better. And
I think too, like, you know, so much of the preparation that we get to be involved in couples journey, you know, is, you know, during classes or you know, as a doula or whatever, is including the partner in this. And I think when you also have a well-prepared, supportive, educated partner, that also changes your experience, and it changes their experience as a parent. And, you know, like, I'm not just a bystander sleeping on the couch on the side because I don't know how to be involved in this. Good luck over there. Like, they get to be involved, which in the birth, you know, in the birth prep and in the birth, and then teaching them how to be included in postpartum and caring for the baby. And, you know, like there's so much that has to do with them together too, that I think is really, really beautiful. And then again, like, sets everybody up for success and you know, in a different way of just like, let's survive. I think you were so right. Like, so much of it is just like, we survived, thank goodness. And it can be so much more than that.
Yeah. I mean, I really like how we talk about how, like, this is a day that is going to change your life. And not just because you know, now have a new baby to take care of, but it's going to change who you are. And a lot of women talk about how they experience kind of like this identity crisis almost, about how, like, they are redefining themselves and who they are, as I think especially after their first baby. Maybe not so much with, you know, if they have more after that, but definitely with that first baby, they're all of a sudden things are shifting, you know, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Their relationships are changing with their partner, with maybe their extended family and friends. And I think, I mean, and she even says there too, like, they remember these things for decades. Like, and she's got it cited. I want to go, like, while I've been reading this whole book, she's got so many great citations that I'm like, I want to go read those. But I think, you know, and I've read that before too, that, like, women, like, you know, when they're kind of, their grandmothers, and they can remember the day that they gave birth to their children, and they may not remember all of the little minute tiny details, but they're going to remember how they were made to feel, how they were supported, how they were treated and talked to. You know, they probably won't remember what time their water broke or something like that, but the things that really matter are the things that they will remember.
That's the part that I love about birth stories. Like, I don't care when your water broke. I mean, that's an interesting tidbit, you know, but like, what I want to know about your birth story is how you felt, and how you were supported, and how you were loved, and how you were touched, and how the room felt. And like, those are all, because those are the things that you're going to remember. And I think that, and those are the things that I think we don't know that are the important part. Like, when people tell their birth stories, they tend to say, my water broke at 5, and you know, and like, but the interesting part, and the part that you're going to remember, is how you felt through the whole process. It's so important. And and I think that it is interesting. I wish that I would have asked my grandmother before she passed away about her births. And
Same.
You know, it would have been at a different time. She had children in like the late 50s, early 60s. So it would have been interesting to just kind of hear a firsthand account of what that experience was like at that time.
Mm-hmm.
because very different from my experiences, I
Right.
am certain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. You said something about, and this was another quote that you sent me from her book that was talking about like um, empowering and the idea of empowering.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I read that was like giving the power to the woman,
Right.
as if, like I have the power that I can give to you, where the power is in her. Like she
Yep.
has the power.
Yep.
And I remember thinking that, like, again, like the more children I had, because I would always hear women talk about like it was a really empowering experience. That was very empowering. And I never like took that word on for my own experiences. And it took me a long time to kind of figure out, like, I felt powerful. Like that's how I was made to feel, was powerful, as
Mm-hmm.
if I already had the power and nobody had it to give to me. I just
Right.
had it in myself.
Yeah.
And so when I think about my births, I think that they were really hard, beautiful, powerful work that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And like I want every woman to, like, whatever, in whatever setting and whatever capacity that looks like for them, and they get to dream and decide for themselves. But like that's what I want, is like every woman deserves to feel powerful in
Mm-hmm.
this really intimate, intense, vulnerable moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I always struggled. I didn't like we use that word empower so often in the birth community,
Mm-hmm.
and we hear that we're going to empower women. And I'm like it never set well with me. Like, because I like in the back of my head, I was like they already have it. Like
Yeah.
they like we don't need to give them anything. Like they have it in them. Like
Yeah.
her body will give birth without
Yeah.
anything else. Like it's gonna
Mm-hmm.
do it no matter what. In a majority of cases, they don't really need there's nothing else that they need to have that baby.
Yeah.
But with all of our conditioning and stuff like that, like, and all the shame that's in our community, especially around women and women's bodies, like we don't
Mm-hmm.
feel that we have that power, and
Yeah.
that's like I said, like with my first one, like after I did that, I was like, man, I can do anything. And I
Right.
totally, like, even the same day I had him at like 4 p.m. By the end of the night, I was like, I could totally do that again. Like 100%, like, and I would
Yeah.
have never said something like that before. I like how you talked about how like your births were hard, but they were powerful. Like we
Yeah.
think of hard and pain as a bad thing in
Mm-hmm.
most instances. And yes, this is going to be, most births are not easy.
Right.
Um, but just because we call something hard doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And the
Yeah.
same thing with pain. Like this is a different kind of pain. This is not a like you have to go to the dentist type of pain,
Right.
or
Mm-hmm.
something is wrong type of pain. Like this is a normal part of the process, and it's a way for our bodies to do this really hard work. And so I
Yeah.
think it's just changing our thought patterns about some of these things, I think, is kind of what's really helpful in helping us realize that we are powerful and we do have the capability of doing these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And our body is so well equipped, like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I read something recently. I wish I could remember. If anybody knows where this is, please send it to me. But they were talking about tearing, and how tearing is, I mean, obviously nobody wants to tear when you when you give birth. That's not like, something that I hope for.
Right.
Um, but how it's a way that our body helps our baby be born. And so when we think of it as a bad thing, then yeah, like that's horrible. And obviously it's not what we want. But if we think of it as a way that it's our body opening up to let our baby out, as like a normal thing, then it kind of changes the way that we think about it. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's the same way with pain. I mean, it's the same way with everything having to do with birth. If we think of it as like something that that is undesirable or bad, then we're going to go into it differently than if we went into it thinking this is normal and this is okay. And I'm going to embrace this because this is what's bringing my baby closer to me. And there's so much
Right.
preparation that we can do on the front end to help that be a better experience, to be able to like embrace it and bring it on and take it one contraction at a time. And we're just kind of not told those things in our society. We're just really all told how it's so bad, and nobody wants pain. Like nobody signs, it's like, I have a great idea today, but when there's so much power into it and it's something that's normal and beautiful and wonderful and vulnerable, that at the end of it, we're holding this tiny human that we created. Like it's just, it like flips kind of that narrative of like, oh, this is bad, to, oh, this is something that's okay and right and works.
Yeah. I think so. I go back to like so much of it is like it's mental preparation.
Yeah.
Like it's like even I've been working on some projects and stuff. I'm like, this all goes back to like mentally preparing, like for all of this. And it's so hard sometimes when I see women, say, I want this in my birth. And then it's just totally, either their provider or whoever, just either railroads them or just it gets thrown out the window or whatever.
Yeah.
Because that's the society we live in. I'm like, how do we change this? How do we make it so that it is more like woman centered and like more, I don't know.
Well,
I totally
answer.
go back
I know
to,
the answer.
Okay, what's your answer?
Midwives.
Oh,
we need more.
Right.
We need more midwives. We need more women-centered care. We need, we need providers that look at birth as normal. And
right.
That's
I think we also just need more like sharing amongst women.
Yeah.
Because I think it even starts back now that I have a daughter that's 11. We've been talking about things and how her body's going to start changing. And I think it starts even then.
Yeah,
like
right.
There's just a complete lack of education for women about what their body is doing. And we look at even just periods, we look at them so negatively. But there's so much opportunity there for women to like learn more about themselves and connect.
Yeah.
And so I think it even starts way back then of like, we've got to change the whole thing. And so I think that if we started there and we started, because back 100 years ago, like you knew what birth was like before you had your first baby. You'd probably seen it before. And women shared their stories and things like that. So I think that that's definitely, and I think that we are seeing more of that. I think just with social media and, more people telling their stories, but I still think we need more positive stories.
Yeah. Well, and women's bodies are so taboo,
right.
Like we don't talk about periods and we don't talk about, and I think too, I mean, I like what you said about like talking to your daughter about it. And again, like that there's power in that, like there's power in your monthly cycle. Like there's like, this isn't something that's ew or gross or, like, yeah, it's uncomfortable and, whatever, but it's part of being a woman. And I think if we changed how we think about these things, then it would change everything. You're right. So there's there, and I think you're right that we're making progress, but there's still so much change to be made for
Oh
our
yeah.
daughters. Like that's the thing too, is like, yeah, I have a 12-year-old daughter. And so as I am thinking about the world that she's growing up in and the communities that she's in and the way that things are talked about and the way that things are explained or not explained, and wanting so much more for her than, you know, that
Yep.
that even I had. And like there's, yeah, like we have to do it for our girls.
Yeah, I think about that too. I'm like, when she starts having kids, you know, in we'll say 15 years, you know, what will it look like then? And I think back, because I've been doing, you know, I've been a birth professional for almost 13 years. Yeah, 13 years. Like, I'm like, okay, so in about that same amount of time, she could have a kid, you know, and so I look back at like, how far have we come in, you know, the last 13 years, and then how far we have to go. And
Yeah. Well, and even thinking like, you know, given the different circumstances, you know, will she even want to have children? And, you know, like, so yeah, there's definitely work to be done. Again, like circling back around, is because how we were treated and made to feel at our births affected how we've raised our children, which then will affect how they give birth and how they raise their children. And so it's generational. And you know, and then thinking, I mean, you say this all the time, Holly, is like when you know, the way that we raise our children, and then they go out into their communities, and you know, so it's not
there's
just
this like
us.
ripple effect.
There's a ripple effect. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And it's the way I had a student once that she was talking about how I don't know if it was another family member or what, but she had when my student got pregnant, this person was telling her like, oh well, you know, just expect to be ignored from now on. Now, you know, once you have a baby, nobody's going to care about you. And so she's kind of telling the story, and I'm like, man, what happened to this woman? Like, is this just kind of her personality, or, you know, whatever? And so I was trying to like dig a little deeper into the story. And basically what happened was that at her birth, I don't know if there was like, you know, it took a little bit for the baby to get started breathing, or it was having a little trouble. I'm not really sure, but like the focus was on the baby and nobody focused on her. Like she was completely ignored after the baby was born.
Wow.
And that was her initiation into motherhood, was I don't matter anymore. And that's the advice, quote unquote advice, that she was giving to my student, which was, well, once the baby's born, just know that you don't matter anymore. And like how heartbreaking that is as a mother to think, well, I don't matter, because you so do. Like, you know, and how that potentially could have affected how she talked to her children, how she raised her children, you know, and then they go out into the communities. And so like it really does all come back to birth, and it's so important. It's so important.
I love when we're like talking to new doulas or childbirth educators, and maybe they have a tough client, or, you know, some students struggling in class with something. And I love when they kind of see those light bulbs go off in them of like, oh, this really is like life-changing work. Like the work that we do as birth professionals really can change somebody's life. And then that, you know, maybe they were in class and they, you know, learned all the things and really had a great birth, because then they now start going and they start sharing their story. And then they will, you know, and I've seen past clients change professions. I've seen them change, you know, how they parent their kids. I've seen like there's so much change that happens surrounding birth, and there's so much potential there. But it's because we treat birth like our society in general treats it like an illness, you know, or a disease or a problem, that like we lose out on all of this potential. And yeah.
I mean, I think about like when people come into my class, like my birth story might be the only positive birth story they've ever heard.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
or the first time that they've heard that birth can be an amazing experience. They're in my class, they're obviously looking for something,
Mm-hmm.
but it really might be the first time that they've ever heard that this doesn't have to be horrible. Like,
Right.
this doesn't have to be scary.
Right.
There's always the unknown, and there's, a certain amount of anxiety or fear that can go into the unknown, but there's so much to say for just being educated and knowing generally what to expect, and how to
Mm-hmm.
get what you want, and how to set yourself up for that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I it's so important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I'm like, we really do. Like, it's like we've kind of come full circle now.
Mhm,
once
mhm.
we've once we started talking about our daughters, then we'll start really getting passionate about it, because
Yeah,
I want her to feel, how as amazing as I felt all four
yeah,
times giving birth. But then,
yeah.
as a parent also going like, she gets to decide what that
I
birth looks
know,
like for
right?
her. And
Hmm.
I think it's
Hmm.
hard no matter whatever it is, when your kids are making choices that are different than you would make, as they get older.
Hmm.
Um, but I want her
Yeah,
to, feel powerful when she has that experience, whenever that is, or if she does. Um,
right. I know.
so yeah. And
Yeah.
I wish
Well,
every woman would feel amazing after their birth. And I
right.
don't care what kind of birth you have. I don't care if it's unmedicated. I don't care if
Mhm.
you need to be induced. I don't like the type of birth doesn't matter to me. It's how you're made to feel. Did you feel supported? Were you part of the decision making process, and were you able to ask questions? And I mean, all that stuff, like, that's what matters to me, is that they leave that birth
Right.
experience feeling that way.
Right.
um
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Well, and
I
that's what
think the
they
whole world would be better with if we could do that.
absolutely. Well, and that's what they say too, like that, like it doesn't matter what type of birth you had.
Mm-hmm.
It matters how you were made to feel. And that is so it's not the type of birth you had that like is equal to if it was a satisfying experience.
Right.
It's all different. It's any kind of birth, but it's the were you part of the decision making, were you heard, were you loved, were you cared for? Like, it's all those, it's that emotional side of it that
Mm-hmm.
that determines how you feel about the birth. And I mean, one of my favorite things to talk about in class are the different types of relaxation. So physical, mental, and emotional. And because I think we forget how the mental and emotional aspect of birth really does shape how we feel about it. So, it's not so much what happened to me physically, it's what happened to me emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so huge and so important to remember and to
Yeah.
prepare for.
Yeah. Yep. I think we could talk about this all day long.
I was just about to say the same thing. I was like, this could
We'll
just
just
snowball.
Yep, we'll just keep going. But I think this is a good place to just
Yeah.
um finish it up, because I'm sure we will talk about this more one day.
Yeah. I mean,
But that
we could do
really,
podcasts on this woman's quotes in this book.
oh
It's so
yes,
good.
all day long. Yeah, I'm about halfway through it, and I've loved all of it. So
Yeah. I can't wait to read
um
it.
but it really does, like, when I read that paragraph, I was like, I mean, I'm like, I've been saying this for years. Like, it's about
Mhm.
so much more than just the day
I
you have your
know.
baby. um
Yeah. Yeah.
and because of that's what makes it worth, like, it is worth the time and energy, maybe a financial investment, whatever it is that is required to help prepare you for that experience. That's why it matters.
Yeah.
Because it's about so much more than just that day that you give birth.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, this
Yay.
was super fun.
It was. It was.
It's fun for us to just, ramble on
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
kind of like our
Yep.
passion topics like this. So,
Yeah. It's like when people are like, oh, sorry, I'm preaching to the choir. And I'm like, oh, no, preach, girl. I love it.
yep. All right.
So
Well,
fun.
thanks for listening, everyone. If you have any thoughts or, anything that you'd like to share with us about this topic, feel free to comment or send us a message. An email works too.
Love it.
Yeah, we love it. All right. Thanks, everyone. Stay tuned. And we will talk to you guys next week.